It's called El Monte for a reason. I mean, we're here by the river. It's a fertile place, not just in the ground, but also culturally speaking. And there's a reason why so many beautiful, creative people have come out of this place. The whole idea was to have these fantastic artists make exceptional art about and for El Monte, and then also to exhibit it in a gallery that was supposed to be created at the Multi-Service Center.
These particular things that we were doing in El Monte, it was an LA County CETA project.
So at the very beginning, they were working with Valle Lindo high school students, and that was high school for at-risk youth.
To work with the kids to just help them paint a few murals around town. And so different artists were working with them.
I was not aware of any murals in El Monte, and didn't even realize there was history here in El Monte. It fascinated me because murals, when you go downtown LA, there's some amazing murals down there. That's what attracted me so much to the Chicano movement, was the acculturation and the celebration of culture, Mexican music, the arts, everything.
So what we see in the 70s is a real momentum that picked up for Chicano activists. And that included activists and artists in El Monte and in South El Monte. We first learned about these lost murals of El Monte through two sources. One of these sources was through a film reel that we uncovered from the basement of the South El Monte City Hall. We saw in this film that murals were in the backdrop and that young people were painting these murals, and these were murals in South El Monte that I had never seen growing up.
Walls previously marked were painted out. Murals designed by the gang members with the aid of artists hired by the city helped erase the eyesores and at the same time expanded the line of communication between the city and gang members.
We had two separate gangs, and so they were always at each other's throat. They gave me the Monte Flores kids. A couple of them had been in prison, and they gave them to me because I'm a gabacho, So they just gave it to me, but I picked out the biggest kid, Brutus, and I just said, "Hey, Brutus, you want to be the foreman?" And he goes, "Yeah." And so if I wanted something done, I just told Brutus, and it got done. And we had so much fun. It became such a tight-knit group that we really had a good time together, and we enjoyed doing the painting and all the stuff. We were painting at Valle Lindo High School. And of course now they tore that down, and it was a pretty fun experience.
Professor Ron Reeder had all this wealth of knowledge about muralism in South El Monte and El Monte. And so that just completely blew my mind. This was a thing that existed in this community, and it was real, and it was thriving for a certain period of time until it wasn't.
Everybody loved the idea, but the city killed it. They were opposed to it from the beginning. They were doing everything they could to shut it down. It was the city officials and those guys, the powers that be.
The city council was mostly white. I always felt like there was nothing here in El Monte to entertain young people.
We received the most opposition and the most disgust from the it was a white lady at the museum. She was one of the people that inspired this. We were asking her questions, and she told us all about how it was the end of the Santa Fe Trail, and the Europeans knew how to drain off a marsh and make it productive soil, and so it was a white community, and the Latinos are interlopers. It was hateful.
El Monte is not the end of the Santa Fe Trail. I went to Santa Fe to look into this, and it turns out that there are many ends to the Santa Fe Trail. And one of them is not in El Monte. The seal of El Monte is foregrounded by a pioneer's covered wagon. It's supposed to represent its history. It's what most of us were taught growing up in South El Monte and El Monte specifically. It serves as the foundation of the constructed history of El Monte as being a place that was ultimately completely founded by white American pioneers. And it really erases the history of Native and indigenous people here, of Spanish, of Mexican colonizers as well in this land. And it really whitewashes the history of El Monte. So Godzilla mural by Ron Reeder never came to be. It never existed, and yet that was the mural that put an end to all murals henceforth. There was already controversy primarily around the mural of the Adelita.
Senorita with a gun, that's what they called it in the newspaper.
So there's an artist, his name was Gronk. He's a former member of ASCO, a very famous Chicano art movement. So Gronk painted this mural here in the Valley Mall on one of the walls, and it was an image of an Adelita, which was a very popular image at the time, again, during the Chicano movement.
She has a flower in her hand, and she has a rifle on the ground and her arm over it. They said Gronk and Roberto were obviously trying to ignite the public to start carrying guns and cause a revolution. And then when we made this proposal, my best friend Joe Janis and we were trying to come up with something that we could do in the community of El Monte, for the community of El Monte.
Ron came up with the concept of Godzilla coming in here as a way to unify everybody.
Everybody hates each other. And that's what we thought was the only way that these guys are ever going to agree about anything, is if there's a greater threat. And so we thought Godzilla visiting El Monte would be perfect. We had permission of the theater owner on the back of the El Monte Theater. Perfect. You know, that's where you go to see those movies when we were kids. We went to the design review board, which was a city council meeting. I showed history of other murals in various communities, church murals, all kinds of things like that.
And then when they saw this Godzilla stomping on buildings and causing chaos in the town, and
they said this was too violent. You know, there was no violence going on in it.
They absolutely hated it and decided that they would not allow artists to continue to come up with these crazy ideas, and they just didn't have time for it and squashed murals from here on.
Disappeared one by one, whitewashed, painted out, painted over. Everything disappeared. It's like we didn't exist in there.
It's difficult for cities such as El Monte to really support and nourish artists and the arts in a city, because there's something about artists and about the arts that defies control. And I think that can be scary for people with power. They understand certainly a lot of the needs of its constituency, but they don't always have a vision for the future, and they certainly don't always have a vision of how culture fits into enacting that vision. The South El Monte Arts Posse is an arts collective that I founded with my husband in 2011. It had been an idea, a seed of an idea. I knew of other art collective movements in mainly Los Angeles, and I knew that we had the talent, that we still have the talent here in El Monte and South El Monte, and I had just dreamed that we could put all of our collective creative brains together and start something new, start something fresh from a new perspective out here in the San Gabriel Valley. On October 10th, here at the Valley Mall, we're going to unveil our first mural in decades. We're going to have a public event, a public unveiling, where we hope everybody can join us in celebrating this mural.
I am very excited about it because it's home. It's home to me now. I've given my entire life to civil rights and social problems, and I think murals not only show art, but they capture stories.
And one of the things that we're hoping that this mural will do is to help narrate the activist history, and we want to really make those historical connections for people. We want them to start thinking big picture and start thinking about what came before.
It's just a loving tribute to the town. That's a community to live in when people can pull together to do something.